Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam, part 4. The brothers make a request of their father. It is a well-known fact that one characteristic of ignorant people is their deep attachment to material things and the way they bow their heads to everyone and everything that bring about advantages for them. Yusuf's brothers could not bear to think of losing the material possibilities he had set before them. As soon as they departed from Egypt, they went to their father's side and asked him to give them their little brother, promising that they would protect him. Then when they got back to their father's house, they said, "Father, our measure has been denied. Please send our brother with us so we may obtain our measure. We will take care of him." Surah Yusuf, verse 63. However, their father did not trust them. He said, "How will my trusting him to your care be different from entrusting his brother before? The best of guardians, however, is Allah. He is the most merciful of the merciful." Surah Yusuf, verse 64. Close inspection will reveal that Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam and Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam generally remembered and praised Allah immediately after speaking. This is an example for believers, showing that they must remember Allah at all times and never forget Him. However, the brothers of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam possessed a fierce longing for material gain. For this reason, they went to enormous lengths to talk their father around. Then when they opened up their saddlebags and found their merchandise returned to them, they said, "Our father, what more could we ask? Here is our merchandise returned to us. We can provide our families with food and guard our brother and get an extra load." That is, any measure to obtain. Surah Yusuf, verse 65. Since Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam did not trust his other sons, he asked them to promise that they would bring their brother back. He said, "I will not send him out with you until you make a covenant with Allah to bring him home unless you are overwhelmed." When they had made their covenant, he said, "Allah is guardian over what we say." Surah Yusuf, verse 66. The reminder issued by Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam that Allah was a witness to this contract and that he made Allah his guardian are important examples of wisdom. This shows us that asking people who are weak in faith to swear on the name of Allah is an effective means of guiding them towards that which is better for them. This is because if they have even a little fear of Allah, they will bear that in mind and behave honestly. After having extracted a certain promise from his children, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam told them to act with caution and to enter Egypt through different gates. He said, "My sons, you must not enter through a single gate, go in through different gates, but I cannot save you from Allah at all, for judgment comes from no one but Allah. In Him I put my trust, and let all those who put their trust put it in Him alone." Surah Yusuf, verse 67. This advice that Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam gave his sons is exceedingly important. These verses draw attention to the fact that believers must always act with caution, calculate any possible dangers, and take the appropriate precautions. At the same time, however, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam again reminds us of the essence behind everything. He says that it is Allah who lays this down, and if Allah wills something, there is no way to prevent it, and that it is necessary to submit to His will. These are exceedingly valuable reminders. Here can be seen the idea of submission to the will of Allah that Muslims need to adopt in its fullest sense. The popular ideas of faith and submission are actually mistaken. Some people imagine that events arise because of measures that they have taken, or that they can cause other things to happen. Others possess a mistaken concept of submission to the will of Allah, along the lines of what is going to happen is already preordained. So there is no need for us to do anything. Both are mistaken. People are responsible for taking the appropriate steps in whatever situation they encounter to set causes in motion, but not to forget that the outcome is in the hands of Allah. Of course, precautions will not determine the outcome of anything, yet they need to be taken carefully and scrupulously as an act of faith. Prophet Yaqub was a complete believer and was fully conscious of this secret. The way that he called upon Allah whenever he spoke and considered the hidden aspect of matters is an indication of his God-fearing nature. We are told in one verse that Prophet Yaqub was a servant possessed of knowledge. But when they entered, as their father said, it did not save them from Allah at all. Yet a need in Yaqub's soul was satisfied. He had knowledge which we had taught him, but most of mankind simply do not know. Surah Yusuf, verse 68. Prophet Yusuf meets his little brother. The brothers of Prophet Yusuf came to Egypt, bringing their little brother with them, and again came into the presence of the Prophet. Here, Prophet Yusuf separated his little brother from the others and revealed his true identity. Then, when they entered into Yusuf's presence, he drew his brother close to him and said, "I am your brother. Do not be distressed concerning all the things they used to do." It appears from Prophet Yusuf's words that his brothers had been doing things to cause him difficulty and distress. This is yet another indication of the way their characters were far removed from religion. After meeting his younger brother, Prophet Yusuf made the rather shrewd move of calling him to his side. He thus rescued his little brother from the hardships which the other brothers were causing him. Prophet Yusuf's ingenuity is described in the following terms in the Quran. Then when he had supplied them with their needs, he put the goblet in his brother's bag. A herald called out, "Caravan, you are thieves." They turned to them and said, "What are you missing?" They said, "We're missing the goblet of the king. The man who brings it will get a camel's load. Regarding that, I stand as a guarantor." They said, "By Allah, you know we did not come to corrupt the land, and that we are not thieves." They said, "What is the reparation for it if it in fact transpires that you are liars?" They said, "Its reparation shall be him in the saddlebags of whom it is discovered. Where those, that is how wrongdoers are repaid." He, Yusuf started with their bags before his brothers and then produced it from his brother's bag. In that way, we devised a cunning scheme for Yusuf. He could not have held his brother according to the statutes of the king only because Allah had willed it so. We raise the rank of anyone we will. Over everyone with knowledge is a knower. Surah Yusuf, verse 70 to 76. Under the laws of Egypt, Prophet Yusuf could not have kept his brother with him, yet he was able to do so thanks to the plan he set in motion. According to this plan, he concealed a goblet in his brother's belongings. One of his men then called out to them in such a manner as to place them into a psychological state of guilt and alarm. On top of that, it was declared that the bowl belonged to the ruler and that whoever found it would be given a full camel load as a reward. The impression was thus created that this was a major incident, thereby preventing any suspicion that it was all a deliberate ploy. Later still, he asked them what the punishment might be if the bowl were discovered to be in their possession. Under the law, the owner of the bag in which the bowl was found would be arrested and detained. Yet, in order not to make it apparent that this was all a ploy, he did not look in his little brother's belongings first, but began searching the other's possessions. When the ball was found amongst their little brother's possessions, the others immediately accepted the situation, accused him of being a thief, and repeated an earlier calumny regarding Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. They said, if he steals now, his brother stole before. Yet his brothers actually knew full well that he would not steal, that he was an honest person. According to the moral standards set out in the Quran, believers must think well of one another and protect each other from slander. The fact that the brothers of Prophet Yusuf ﷺ did not defend their innocent younger brother and actually implicated the Prophet himself is an indication of their false and hypocritical natures. The Prophet Yusuf ﷺ behaved with the greatest patience in the face of this situation. They said, if he steals now, his brother stole before, but Yusuf kept it to himself and still did not disclose it to them, saying, the plight that you are in is worse than that. Allah knows best the matter you describe. Surah Yusuf, verse 77. Prophet Yusuf's attitude here is an example of both submission to the will of Allah and of great intelligence. Most ignorant people become annoyed whenever they hear the slightest word spoken against themselves and react in an emotional manner. Prophet Yusuf ﷺ, however, kept his thoughts concealed, as the verses tell us. In other words, he did not allow his innermost feelings to be sensed by others. The events which follow are related below. They said, Your Eminence, he has an old and venerable father, so take one of us instead of him. We see without a doubt that you are of the people who do good. He said, Allah forbid that we should take anyone but him with whom our goods were found. In that case we would clearly be wrongdoers. When they despaired of him, they went apart to talk alone. The eldest of them said, You know full well your father had you make a covenant with Allah concerning this, and how before you failed him with Yusuf. I will not leave this land until I have permission from my father or Allah decides about the case on my behalf. Truly, he is the justest judge of all. Here it is seen that one of Prophet Yusuf's brothers had slightly more conscience than the others. In fact, a similar situation had arisen at the time when Prophet Yusuf ﷺ was thrown into the well, and most of his brothers wanted to kill him, at which one of them said, Do not take Yusuf's life, but throw him to the bottom of the well, so that some travellers may discover him, if this is something that you have to do. Maybe these two are actually one and the same individual. Allah knows best. What we are comparing here is an interesting human character, a character that understands with its conscience that what is going on around it is sinful, but which fails to stand up to these events sufficiently and is only able to put up a modest opposition. Even though this is a much more positive model than cruel people with no conscience at all, it is still highly deficient and lacking when compared to the character of a sincere believer. The character of the believer is of a kind that requires swift and immediate intervention when it sees behavior contrary to the religion of Allah, or cruelty, or lack of conscience. The believer is never helpless, never falls under the spell of group psychology or under the influence of the cruel majority around him, and never makes compromises on what is right. He will never deviate from the path of Allah, even if everyone around him does. The conversation between the brothers of Prophet Yusuf ﷺ is related in the Quran in these terms. Return now to your father and say to him, Your son stole, father. We can do no more than testify to what we know, and we are not the guardians of the unseen. asked questions of the town in which we were and of the caravan in which we came, for we are surely telling you the truth. He said, it's merely that your lower selves suggested something to which you did. But for me, beauty lies in steadfastness. Perhaps Allah will bring them all together. He is indeed all-knowing and all-wise. On close examination, the brothers really did believe that their little brother had engaged in theft, yet as we have already seen, it was a grave error for them to think in such terms. They should have known that a believer would never, ever do such a thing, and that they should have thought the best of their brother and assumed that there had been some kind of mistake. In fact, Prophet Yaqub ﷺ behaved in just the manner one would have expected of a believer. He never admitted the slightest possibility that his son might be a thief, since he knew that he was a believer, one who feared Allah, as well as this, since he knew that the morals of his other sons were far removed from those of a religion. He refused to trust them and assumed that their own unscrupulous dealings lay at the foot of the matter, that it was some trick of theirs. Prophet Yaqub's submission to the will of Allah here is another example of the upright conduct befitting a believer. Although he believed that what had happened to his son was a mistake of some sort and there was a trick involved somewhere, he immediately turned to Allah and patiently sought His help. Again, he made it clear that what befitted him was patience. Prophet Yaqub ﷺ never lost hope. He even hoped that Allah would reunite him with Yusuf ﷺ and his other son in the near future. Moreover, believing that there is something auspicious in every event is one of the most defining characteristics of believers. That there was something auspicious in the other brother's belief that the youngest had stolen the goblet is borne out by the fact that they were thereby easily persuaded to leave the youngest brother behind in Egypt without creating any difficulties for Prophet Yusuf ﷺ. Prophet Yaqub ﷺ, on the other hand, knew this secret, that is, that Allah created everything and made them favourable for believers. In fact, the most striking aspect of his attitude is the way that he does not link the events to material causes, does not think with a superficial logic of cause and effect, and knows that everything is very definitely under the control of Allah. This example shows that believers must never abandon their hope in Allah. No matter what happens, no matter how difficult situations or conditions, they must always be full of hope and call upon Allah for help. However, Prophet Yaqub ﷺ was in an interesting position. Despite knowing that Allah created everything, he did not hesitate to feel sorrow as regards Prophet Yusuf ﷺ and his brother. That was his test. So testing was the experience, in fact, that as revealed in the Quran, his eyes turned white from grief over Prophet Yusuf ﷺ. That is to say, he went blind. His sons warned him that he might fall sick because of the sorrow he felt or even die. He turned himself away from them and said, "What anguish is my sorrow for Yusuf?" And then his eyes turned white from hidden grief. They said, "By Allah, you will not ever stop to mention Yusuf till you will be exhausted or will be ready to die." He said, "I make complaint about my grief and sorrow to Allah alone, because I know things from Allah you do not." Surah Yusuf, verse 84 to 86. It is indicated in these verses that sorrow can lead to serious illness. In fact, in many places in the Quran, Allah tells people not to feel sorrow or sadness. When that stricture is not adhered to, negative consequences can be seen at once. Apart from the psychological effects of sorrow, it also brings with it serious physical consequences, such as darkening under the eyes, tension in the face, the hair going grey, bodily collapse, etc. As the episode continues, Prophet Yaqub asked his sons to go and bring him news of the Prophet Yusuf and his brother. My sons, seek news of Yusuf and his brother. Do not despair of solace from Allah. No one despairs of solace from Allah except for people who are disbelievers. Worthy of note here is the fact that Prophet Yaqub was sure that Prophet Yusuf was still alive. The reason for that certainty may perhaps have been a special knowledge Allah imparted to him, as is revealed in the Quran. Allah is able to give His prophets and messengers such things as powerful sensory perception, exceptional wisdom, consummate insight, superior foresight, and the ability to see future events. For that reason, it is necessary to rely on those to whom such knowledge is given, to trust in and abide by them. Another fact that emphasized in this verse is that believers must always be hopeful under all circumstances. Prophet Yaqub never lost hope that he would see Prophet Yusuf and his brother, and he advised his sons never to abandon hope in Allah. Loss of hope in Allah is a state of mind fit for unbelievers, not the faithful. Prophet Yusuf is recognized by his brothers. The Quran describes the meeting of the Prophet Yusuf as with his brothers as follows. So when they came into his presence, they said, Your Eminence, hardship has hit us and our families. We bring scant merchandise, but fill the measure for us generously. Allah always rewards a generous giver. The attitude adopted by the brothers at the end of the above verse is particularly worthy of note. After begging Prophet Yusuf to be generous towards them, they recall Allah and the fact that He will reward those who give generously. This is an indication of their hypocritical behavior, despite living in the way that is contrary to religion and the good pleasure of Allah, and that their forgetting Allah during the course of their actions, they recall Him when their interests are at stake. The fact that Allah loves those who truly seek His good pleasure is revealed in the Quran, and of that there is no doubt. On the other hand, those people who ignore what is pleasing to Allah and only call on Him when their own interests are at stake still imagine that they can influence others in spite of this attitude. In the following verse, Prophet Yusuf hinted at his own identity in the face of this request for help by his brothers, without taking any interest in what they said. This is how he enabled them to understand who he actually was. He said, Are you aware of what you did to Yusuf and his brother in ignorance? They said, Are you Yusuf? He said, I am indeed Yusuf. And this here is my brother. Allah has acted graciously to us. And for those who fear Allah and are steadfast, Allah does not allow to go to waste the wage of any people who do good. They said, By Allah, Allah has favoured you above us. Clearly, we were in the wrong. As can be seen from the statements in these verses, Prophet Yusuf's brothers managed to surmise that they were dealing with Prophet Yusuf himself. Declaring their regret and the fact that they had committed an error, they accepted that Allah had singled Yusuf out and that He had chosen him over them. An important point is being emphasized here. The power of choice belongs to Allah. This fact is also revealed in the Quran in the words, Your Lord creates and chooses whatever He wills. The choice is not theirs. Prophet Yusuf gave his brothers the following reply. He said, No blame at all will fall on you. Today you have forgiveness from Allah. He is the most merciful of the merciful. As can be seen from the above verse, despite the fact that Prophet Yusuf was in a position to have punished his brothers or treated them badly, he did not question them, but rather said that he did not condemn them. In fact, he even asked Allah for forgiveness for them, reminding them that Allah was the most merciful of the merciful. This behavior on the part of Prophet Yusuf alayhi is an example to all the faithful. Ignorant people are inspired by hatred in such situations and act with the logic of revenge. Believers, on the other hand, decline to insist on their own personal rights, as was the case with Prophet Yusuf and know that it is forgiving behavior that finds favour in the sight of Allah. This, in line with the verse, makes allowances for people, command what is right and turn away from the ignorant. They forgive wicked behavior and demonstrate superior moral virtues by countering evil with good. The knowledge of Prophet Yusuf alayhi. Following those words to his brothers, Prophet Yusuf alayhi gave them his shirt, asking them to take it to their father. Go with this shirt of mine and cast it on my father's face, and he will see again. Then come to me with all your families. And when the caravan went on its way, their father said, I can smell Yusuf's scent. You probably think I have become senile. They said, by Allah, your mind is still astray. This verse demonstrates that his family thought that Prophet Yaqub had committed an error because of the way he missed his son. There is a wise lesson to be borne in mind which arises from this attitude of theirs. It is often a mistake to make judgments in the light of external appearances and causes. That is because Allah has spoken in the Quran of actions which are taken based upon knowledge that is specially granted. For example, this matter is illustrated in some detail in the episode of Prophet Musa's encounter with a servant of Allah possessed of special knowledge. For further details, see Harun, the Prophet Musa's book. Allah had in any case revealed that Prophet Yaqub was a servant possessed of special knowledge. His family failed to understand his behavior, which was adopted on account of that knowledge, and approached matters from a superficial perspective, believing him to be in error. In fact, after receiving the shirt, Prophet Yaqub reminded his family of the special knowledge Allah imparted to him. But when the bringer of the good news came, he cast it on his face and sight returned. He said, Did I not say to you before, I know things from Allah you do not know? As we have seen, the words previously spoken by Prophet Yusuf came to pass. When they wiped the shirt over their father's face, his sickness left him and his eyes began to see again. He thus regained his health. In addition, Prophet Yaqub's words came true. He had seen and felt beforehand that he would see Yusuf again. This is a true indication that both were servants possessed of special knowledge. Prophet Yusuf's dream comes true. Prophet Yusuf is reunited with his family. Prophet Yaqub received the news along with the evidence to support it that Yusuf was alive. The lie that his brothers had kept concealed for so long came to light. They had told their father that he had been killed and eaten by wolves, whereas Yusuf was actually still alive. When this emerged, his children begged Prophet Yaqub to forgive them. They said, Our father, may we be forgiven for all the many wrongs that we have done. We were indeed greatly mistaken men. He said, I will ask my Lord to pardon you. He is ever forgiving, most merciful. Surah Yusuf, verse 97-98. On close inspection, Prophet Yaqub said he would seek forgiveness not immediately but at a later time. Why should Prophet Yaqub not have sought forgiveness for his children straight away? The wisdom in this may have been that he wished to see what their subsequent behavior and attitude would be. He may have wanted to see whether they had really abandoned the error of their ways and were truly sincere. For that reason, it may be that he would pray for them when he had formed that opinion. Allah knows best, of course. Yet, As is made clear at the end of the verse, Prophet Yaqub also reminded them of Allah's compassionate and forgiving nature. He did that so that they might hope for forgiveness from Allah and turn to Him in sincere repentance. The subsequent developments are related in the Quran in these terms. Then when they entered into Yusuf's presence, he drew his parents close to him and said, "Enter Egypt safe and sound, if Allah wills." The first thing Prophet Yusuf did when he met his family was hold them to his chest and remind them that they were safe. It can be seen from this verse that embracing someone is a sincere expression of love. Reassuring someone that they are safe is a delicate gesture that allows them to relax. It must have been exceedingly reassuring for these people who had come on a long journey and experienced many difficulties to know that they were now comfortable and secure. This is exemplary behavior for believers to follow, putting a guest, a stranger, or someone under one's roof at ease by ensuring them that they are free to enjoy the safety and comfort of one's land or home is a beautiful gesture to which attention is drawn in the Quran. Neither were the hospitality and the subtlety of Prophet Yusuf limited to this. The respect that Yusuf showed his parents is described as follows in the Quran. He raised his parents up onto the throne. They fell prostrate in front of him. Surah Yusuf, verse 100. Sitting his mother and father on a throne is a delightful expression of respect. They were older than him, and furthermore, his father was a prophet whom Allah had strengthened with knowledge. They displayed great humility in the face of Yusuf's respectful behavior. Careful examination reveals that despite the fact that Prophet Yusuf was their son and they were much older than him, they treated him with great humility. It is stated in the verse that his family prostrated themselves before him. This must have been a widespread demonstration of respect according to the customs of the time. There is of course no implication of worship here. Among ignorant people in such circumstances, pride enters into the equation and the parties involved hesitate to have in sincere and respectful manner. In ignorant societies, people strongly avoid any expression of respect, such as bowing, particularly to anyone who happens to be younger than them. However, the behavior of Prophet Yusuf and his family was based on respect, love and humility. This is a clear illustration of what a believing family should be like. In this climate, then, Prophet Yusuf described everything that had befallen him and revealed the flawless workings of Allah's plan. "My father, truly, this is now the interpretation of the dream I had. My Lord has made it all come true, and He was kind to me by letting me out of prison and brought you from the desert when Shaitan had caused dissent between me and my brothers. My Lord is kind to anyone He wills. He is indeed all-knowing, all-wise." Surah Yusuf, verse 100. It will be recalled that Prophet Yusuf had dreamt of 11 stars, the sun and moon prostrating themselves before him. The fact that years later his position was such that his mother, father and brothers showed him great esteem and bowed down before him out of respect, and the fact that his brothers in particular came into this presence when they had need of him was the fulfillment of that dream. Further scrutiny again reveals that while Prophet Yusuf was explaining all this, he called on Allah and praised His name, and he also explained that the events so far undergone by him and his family had taken place as part of Allah's plan. This is the kind of exemplary understanding and speech that a believer should adopt. Another characteristic of Prophet Yusuf that is noteworthy here is the way in which he saw the positive side of everything and interpreted everything in a favourable manner. For example, he said that Allah had done him a kindness and freed him from the dungeon. This is very literally the kind of attitude befitting a believer and proof that he looked at things with a positive and optimistic expectation. Prophet Yusuf thus made it clear that he was on the side of Allah and avoided any kind of speech or behavior that was negative or unappreciative of anything Allah creates. The fact that he said, "My Lord is kind to anyone he wills, he is indeed all-knowing and all-wise," is a demonstration of this. In this way, Prophet Yusuf sets an example to all of the faithful.